Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Today we are going to be talking about identifying unmet needs. So yesterday's session, we had established or talked about a couple of things, which is the importance of scientific research, how that research typically emerges from academic labs and research institutions, and therefore the role of the professors, the PIs, the lab members, how useful and valuable it is in getting some of these more advanced science-based technologies off the ground from the lab and to the market. One of the other things we looked at was concepts and frameworks like technology readiness levels, which trace and allow you to assess where you are at in terms of your own technology commercialization journey. Then we also looked at ARLs. Can anyone tell me what ARLs are? Anyone remembers? Adoption readiness levels. And adoption readiness levels are important because they are not just looking at the technology, but they are also getting you to think about market aspects and what might be issues or challenges, and how do you get your technology moving forward towards eventual adoption. By adoption, I mean products and services are offered for sale and people are adopting it or procuring it or buying it, which is what makes it a business in the end. Now, at the center of all of this process, one of the things that we had seen was the connection between technology and market. So if you are focusing only on technology, not on market, you will have some challenges. In fact, one of the major challenges in many technology ideas is that the people developing the technology are not exploring market applications early enough. The number one reason why startups fail is because they are building something that nobody wants. Even after lots of work, training, lots of outreach, it is still possible that you find that the focus of many startups is the technology. And if you ask them, who are you solving it for, or what problem are you solving, the answers are not clear enough. And this can create tremendous challenges, because even if you are looking at research grants or grant applications, even when you're in the lab, if you are looking for funding, you will get questions as to who is it targeted towards. You may not have an answer if you haven't thought about this. Post grants, if you're looking to raise funding from investors, they will definitely ask this question. So at every stage, it is important as a technology developer to really understand who are you solving for and what is the nature of their problem. The other thing is, when you ask scientists and engineers or people developing technologies, who are you solving for, or what's your startup going to do? An early stage answer might be, we are solving or curing diabetes for all the diabetes patients in the world. That is an early stage response, because the assumption is whatever technology you are developing will work for all types of diabetes patients, across different countries, across very many layers. And when you talk to someone who has spent a couple of years in this process, they will say things like, I will work with a small portion of the diabetes population in country X as a start. The way I will reach that particular group of people will be, I will be working with doctors, and I have got some doctors who are scientific advisors or advisors on my startup. I have been going to medical conferences related to diabetes for the past 2, 3 years, and they have provided testimonials. I have done research papers in collaboration with these people. I've got research grants. That's the way you would build credibility. Because one of the things I mentioned yesterday was people typically don't know these scientists and entrepreneurs. They don't know the startup. So you have to counter that liability of newness by conveying to people that you have got other members as advisors who have lot of 10, 15, 20 years or more of experience in that domain. And then that will allow you to unlock investment. Investment will allow you to unlock other members from the team, and then you will build your idea forward. Because one of the other things that I mentioned yesterday, it's often difficult to all this as a one person team. You will need other people also. Okay. So unmet market needs. Market needs are significant customer pain points. So remember the example that I gave you from yesterday. If you are solving the 7th or the 10th problem that somebody is facing, that is not important enough for them to buy your product often, right? So you should be able to understand what is the biggest problem being faced. Are you addressing some of the big problems faced by a particular consumer group? The other part in this statement that is important is profitably. Because as a technical person, you may find that you are able to solve the technical problem, but the price or the cost of solving it means that the price you charge is higher than what currently is offered by competitors on the market. Then people may not go for it, right? Unless you have a clear value proposition. So if there is not a good enough solution, but a possible solution on the market by a competitor charging 500 rupees, and your solution is 1500 rupees, more often than not, people will choose 500. Did you solve the technical problem? Yes. Is your technical solution better than competition? Probably yes. Will people buy it? Probably no. So you have to not only solve the technical problem, but you have to solve it in a manner that allows you to compete on the market, right? And there is a big gap between what works in lab settings and the manufacturing scale, or the, in case you are not planning to do your manufacturing, you say, I will outsource to some other country, they will make it and we will ship it in. All of these are costs, right? So unless there is a system where people are willing to pay a higher price because the quality you offer is so remarkable, it's life saving, then people might pay a higher price. But in many instances, that may not be the case. So this one sentence, there are times when it will take a couple of years for people developing to make sure that they can address this single sentence. One, finding the right market, understanding their needs, understanding their most important needs or pain points, trying to solve that technical problem and then solving that technical problem profitably. That is when you would have a business. Unaddressed today is a sort of a high bar, where the expectation is that other people have tried, they have failed, and you are coming in, you are doing it, and you managed to solve a problem others couldn't solve. That's a high bar. What also happens at times is sometimes the startup solves a problem, but startup does not have the capacity to scale. In which case, you might be the first at solving it, but the larger incumbent player might acquire, which is again biomedical domain, that can also happen. So there are instances where the second or the third player in the market might supersede. The one example that I'll give is, think about BlackBerry, Canadian success. At one point of time, everybody used BlackBerry phones. And there are quotes from their senior leadership team at one point saying that we don't have a strong, or we don't need a marketing department. Our products sell by themselves. People just want it, we make it, and off it goes. We don't need to market our products. From that peak, they have gone down. And who is the second or the third person? It's Apple and iPhones and others have come later, right? So there are times in technology history where it is the second or third person or entity that comes in, and they then have the ability to learn from the mistakes made by the earlier people, and then they try and do a better job. They spend a lot more money on marketing, and then they go ahead. So there can be instances where startups take that lead and they are able to take it forward. But the bigger challenge for startups is that they tend to get acquired. So it's rarer. One, startups are risky. Startups are a lot of work, well beyond the 9 to 5 sort of jobs that people have. On being an entrepreneur is much more intense. So when somebody succeeds in solving that problem and they get offered a lot of money, many people decide to get acquired. Only few decide to stay in control and keep the company and grow it like that, which is more challenging. So yes, so while unaddressed today is definitely something that's important, and I will have a couple of examples. The bar is very high. If you look at many sectors, it's very rare that something is truly new. In fact, if you look at the word innovation, it is linked to the Latin word innovare, which is about newness. So when I teach one of my courses, I ask participants, what do we mean by new? So any thoughts on the word new? Yeah, something not existing currently, or in that statement saying that something is new, you are implicitly acknowledging that other things exist. Old, there is some things that are old. This is not old, this has come into existence, it is new. Now newness can have a couple of different layers. It can be new to your country, it can be new to your state, it can be new to your industry, but it is common in some other industry, or it can be new to the world. The first time, new to the world is extremely high bar. Like, I will have an example later, when lasers were first invented, that is new to the world. But lasers, you would have had some market application in one sector. Now lasers exist, have been applied in one sector, communications, but then lasers are being used in welding. So is it new for welding? Of course it is new. Is it new to the world? No, it already was there, right? So newness has layers, and there will be value in understanding where your technology is vis-a-vis competition, and we'll get to some of those layers. Now, one of the other things that we look at is demand pull and technology push when we talk about uh, inventions and science-based inventions. So in some instances, you have a very strong impetus from the market. There is a strong market need, and that market need can be solved by a couple of different products, and those products can have a range of capabilities. Can be solved by a range of capabilities. One example. So think about COVID. So during COVID, during the pandemic, there were ultimately, what did society want? How can we handle that pandemic? Now you could handle it by wearing masks. You could handle it by putting hand sanitizers. You could handle it by developing vaccines. You could handle it, if somebody got COVID, you could handle it by having therapeutics. So if the ultimate goal is managing a pandemic, there are a couple of different ways, different products. And the technological capability needed to make a mask is very different from the technological capability needed to make a vaccine. Right? But ultimately, the hope is all of these things will help society manage the pandemic better, fewer people die, less fatalities. Governments want to provide these options to society. So for the same underlying challenge, there is a range of products. Each of those products has a range of different capabilities that are needed to produce. I know of beer manufacturers who have fermentation setups, large scale, who pivoted from beer because during the pandemic, nobody was going out, nobody was socializing. They couldn't really sell a lot of their product, and they were really focused on helping their own countries. They pivoted from manufacturing beer to manufacturing hand sanitizers because the underlying equipment or technological capability was similar, right? So these capabilities or technological capabilities are what are the key. So you might unlock from the same technological capability, you might be able to make different things for different markets. Okay, so this was an example of the market needing something and people coming with a range of solutions. Now let us look at the flip side. Let us look at technology push, where scientists, engineers in the lab, they develop some technology without necessarily thinking about market applications. We just made it with disciplinary interest or research problem being solved. We make something, and then we are trying to figure out, well, we made this, it looks very interesting. What can it be used for? We didn't think about that, or we haven't thought enough about that yet. That is also quite common. So in that kind of a case, starting from a technological capability to make something, you start exploring, well, what are the range of things I can make? with this capability. And for those kind of products, who will need those products in which markets? So you are pushing the technology to the market. The first example was the market pulling products and ideas. Here is a major problem. We want a solution. Governments will give money. Philanthropists will give funding. Everybody will try to come together and try to solve that problem. It happens. And so, in some instances, we are in between in many cases where the technology being developed is not necessarily new to the world. Even in some of the foremost technical areas, you will find that there are a couple of labs across the world simultaneously working on it, right? It is very rare to say that, well, we are the only lab in the whole world working on something, right? For the most part, what you are working on, whether it is telecommunications, whether it is biotechnology, whether it is advanced materials, anything you are working on, chances are there'll be at least a couple, if not hundreds or thousands of researchers in labs across the world working on that similar technical problem, right? So it's not necessarily new to the world. And then many of them may not be thinking about market applications, which is where you have an opportunity in that if you focus on market applications, then someday if you want to start a venture, you will be better prepared. Okay. So talking about lasers. When the laser was invented in 1960, it was mentioned by the assistant of the person who invented it. He said, this is a solution looking for a problem. We made it. Here is a laser, but we don't know what it will be used for. In the press conference given by the inventor, he mentioned 5 applications or potential applications. One was increasing the number of communication channels, the amplification of light, probing matter for basic research, high-powered beams for space communications in 1960, and concentrating light for industry, chemistry, and medicine. If you look at each of those statements, you notice that they are very broad areas. They are not necessarily very specific as to, I am going to solve diabetes for this category of patients in this country, working with so and so hospital and so on, right? So at this stage, this was fundamental research, basic research, with limited thought given to potential applications. Now, if you can see this figure, it is too small. I wanted to keep all of it together on one figure. This shows 2021 laser industry revenues of $15.2 billion. Fundamental research, new to the world, 1960, and look at the number of years, and look at the number of sectors, industries, applications for lasers that have emerged from one fundamental discovery. But it takes time, right? So long timelines, which was the first thing that I started my session yesterday. It takes long periods of time. Of course, now with the supports that are in place, with the incubators, accelerators, with the training, with the understanding of market needs, you could do it a whole lot faster in some instances. So all of this to say that as developers of technology, focusing on science-based innovations, you would really want to have more and more of understanding of market needs. Now, the next question is, well, we've talked about market needs. How will we find that? How will we get to market needs? How will we know? So you can attend industry conferences or events. Try to focus on what people say is a problem. There are times people are celebrating, saying, we did this, this is our new product, all that is fine. But try and understand where the problems are in a field. In your technical discipline, what are the biggest problems to be solved? That is where you might have a chance to start a venture. Speak to industry leaders and scientists, follow industry news, speak to investors, VC investors that are specific to your sector. Now, what happens in many instances is early on in as a nation evolves or economy grows, you have limited sources of financing for startups, but as the economy grows, you will have more and more sources, more sophisticated sources of financing, who will be able to assess technology ideas. So venture capitalists become sector specific, or they will at least have people who will be deep experts in different sectors. And so when you approach VCs or angel investors or others for different kinds of funding, you will find that there will be people who will have deep sectoral experience, sometimes PhDs in the scientific disciplines, along with management training or business training, sometimes having experience of started up ventures themselves, and then they will be in these kind of roles. So you can speak with those kind of investors, and they can also unlock and tell you, well, this is the challenge in the ag tech domain in India, or this is the challenge in the biotherapeutics domain, or this is the challenge in aerospace at the moment. Everybody is trying to solve this major problem. For example, when you talk about batteries, one of the key components is energy density. How do you make sure that the batteries that you use, whether it's in your cell phones or laptops or other devices to automotive applications, how do you make the batteries have more energy in them? How do you make these batteries able to get charged faster and faster? And how do you make sure that all of this is done in a manner that is safe? And how do you make sure that these batteries can last 10,000 cycles or more so that they last for a long period of time? So these are all the technical problems for, say, one particular domain that people are trying to solve. They are trying to improve the energy density of batteries using different materials. They are trying to make sure that they are safer. They are trying to make sure that they hold more charge. They hold the ability to do fast charging and so on. Because the competition is not necessarily from batteries. If you think about electric vehicles, you go to a gas station or a petrol station here, you fill a tank of fuel, it takes you how much time? 2 minutes. That is the competition for battery charging. So if it's a technical problem to be solved, the technical problem solution is not just competing between one battery material to another battery material. The solution from the user's point of view is, I was used to filling my tank in 2 minutes. Now I spent so much more money at times and bought an electric vehicle, and now I have to spend 20 minutes, right? So from a user's perspective, the competition is beyond just battery startups. It changes the way you think about competition, because your competition, I'm a startup making batteries, so I will think about other labs or other startups making batteries. That is one level of competition. But your competition from the user's point of view is, well, I used to get this job done in 20 minutes or in 2 minutes. And why is this new technology or people behind this technology expecting me to spend 20 minutes? Would that even be possible in a country like India? Right? With the charging infrastructure that would be needed, the demand that would be unlocked. Then you talk about the capacity of the electric substations and the grids and transmission lines. How much electricity would be needed if a lot of electric vehicles are adopted, right? It starts impacting electricity generation and transmission and distribution, which is a factor in some other countries in Europe and other places where people are looking at that. So all of these factors become important. Then I'm sure many of you must know that there are reports and annual reports filed by companies, and you can get that information. Sometimes it's available freely online. It is on the company websites. There are press releases. All of that can give you information on the stages of growth of a startup or public companies in particular. And you can learn more about how they are thinking about technology, how they are thinking about competition. All of that data exists and it's available. One lesser known but hugely valuable source of understanding unmet market needs is online customer reviews of competition. So if you look at competing products and you find that people are not happy with something, and this is human psychology, people find it more difficult to say good things about a positive experience. They find it easier to say negative things about something not working well. So you will find enough and more examples, online reviews of people not happy with some product or service. That can give you an understanding of what people want. If you see a pattern or a trend over time that I bought this laptop, I bought this device, and I have found that it loses charge very quickly. And you find that for that particular brand, everybody or most people are saying that. Or they said that the camera was really going to be remarkable. It isn't, it doesn't do anything much. So you start realizing what are people valuing. They are valuing battery performance. They are valuing an indicator like the quality or the resolution of the photographs taken and so on, right? Which then allows you to design something better. The other example that I will give is that of, say, scientific calculators. So when you use scientific calculators, you might find that for many people, you may not use all of the functionality that is embedded in it. You might use a fraction of its potential, right? And therefore, for an example like that, you will find that there are times when the products that you buy or that are available on the market exceed customer expectations. So you could design products that are frugal. There is a whole area, there is a label or areas of research which are frugal innovation. And they talk about how can you make things simpler, more cost effective, and more hardy, can be used in remote locations or remote villages where you do not have Wi-Fi, where you do not have electricity at times. How do you make sure that the product works in those kind of settings? So there are times when large companies are on a technology trajectory or a product development trajectory. And they've always made a product. So every year in meetings, the discussion is what new can we add? So over time, the products that are developed will have more and more features, small features, and every feature is expensive because it took people time to develop it. And over time, you end up with something that is very cumbersome, that has many, many different features, only a fraction of which might be used actually by the population. And so startups sometimes can be helpful in identifying what are the core set of features. You only develop things that people are actually needing, that can bring down the costs, that can help you access more markets or bring new people onto the market. Then, when we talk about market research with users and stakeholders, there are a couple of different ways to do it. There are focus groups where you can invite experts or you can invite different types of users from different sectors and get them to speak about their experience using a particular product, or you can ask them about more detailed information about the challenges that they face. Here I'll give you a non-scientific example. So there was an ethnographic, there was a study to try and understand how people choose a particular brand of a car to buy. And a couple of different brands or models were there. And over time, they were taking videos, and they noticed that people would go to different cars and they would come back and say, we are going to choose one particular brand or one particular model. And whenever they were asked, why are you making that choice? They would say, yeah, this is a strong car. This is a robust car. That's why we want to go for it. But people were unclear on how they were assessing robustness. When you ask them, well, how did you assess that? How did you know that this is a strong car? Nobody had an answer. And then a researcher took a closer look at the videos, and he noticed that when the people were getting out of the cars, each car, they used to close the door, sometimes a little bit harder than was needed. And then subconsciously, they were noting the sound made by the closing of the door. The car which was more robust had heavier gauge material. It was heavier, so the sound made by the door was different. Now, the people doing this, the potential customers, didn't know what they were doing, and they were still doing it. And later on, it was found out that this is what they are checking. This is how they are assessing durability or quality of the product. And of course, if the price is similar, they want to go for a higher quality product. That's the reason for this choice. So sometimes you have these kind of groups or sessions where you may be able to uncover through research the true reasons why people are actually buying products. And buying or purchasing is a complex task. Like I was touching upon healthcare yesterday. There are times when it's the doctor prescribing. There are times when it is the patient's family buying something for the patient. There are other times when the patients are buying it for themselves, right? So many different groups of people may be involved in the decision to purchase the same product, right? So you have to understand who are you speaking to, what is the value for them. Are they just looking at the cost? Are they looking at comfort for the family member? Are they looking at ease of use for the surgeon or the doctor or the nurse? What is the reason for the decision to purchase? It can be complex. It is not easy or simple to identify. Then you can do potential customer interviews. By any chance, has anyone been part of a focus group or run a focus group among you? No. So running a focus group is also not easy. It needs some expertise to really figure out what kind of questions to ask, what things to emphasize. So it's not just a task of let us develop a list of questions, we'll ask them and we get the answer. It is a little bit more nuanced and layered than that. So you need people who have some training, who have got some experience and expertise in doing this work to be able to pull out some of these nuances or insights. Then, of course, as you sort of expand, you may consider once you are getting some more information, you may have survey research that you might do to really unlock what are the reasons that people are buying your product. And then there are times where there are lead users or people who are really interested in experimenting. You might know people who always want the latest brands of phones, they want the latest devices, they are keen to test out new technologies or facilities. Sometimes these users can help you understand what might be valued by people, what features or products or product features might be acceptable or valued by people and what may not be valued. So all of these are ways in which you can try and unlock the unmet needs. Now, part of the challenge often is, like I said, when we talk about newness, is there might be products on the market from competition that are partially addressing the needs. So it's not binary, it's not 0 or 1. So there might be products which are existing on the market, but they don't do a good job. That is also an opening for you, right? So don't think that every technology that gets developed is first in the world. That's rarely the case. More often than not, it offers some significant advantage, it offers some significant benefit, and that benefit is valuable enough for the population and people who it's targeted at. And all of this is quite hard work. So if you look at that previous slide, all of that is pretty hard work. It takes a long time to do this. You go to a conference, it's not necessary that people will immediately start talking to you. So over time, they will notice you, you will build that trust, you will start getting that information. You follow up with them over email or future conversations over time, and over a couple of months, sometimes years, you will get more and more detailed insights on the practical experience of people as to what problems exist on the ground, which are not there in magazines or journals. It is the real problems faced by the people. And therefore, to do that kind of work and to persist in trying to uncover these market needs, you need people who are champions, who are really focused, who are not distracted, who know what they want to do, they want to achieve, they are laser focused in a way, to draw on the previous example, to get to a solution that solves a clear unmet need in the market. And this quote is from Bob Langer, that, like I said yesterday, these people are willing to do things well beyond some other large companies at times who may get distracted, who may have other plans or strategies. So it might be that small startup who's focused, taking all the risk, persistent, taking all that effort, and then moving it forward. And often in my conversations, sometimes these scientists and innovators are starting companies not because they wanted to become entrepreneurs. In fact, you will be surprised at the number of scientists who are successful entrepreneurs who say that that was never my plan. That was not what was my goal. What I wanted to do was to solve a problem. I saw a very important problem. I saw it repeated day in and day out, and people are facing it. And I wanted to, no one else was doing anything about it. And I wanted to solve it. And in doing so, I started a company. I started a venture, and it became successful over time. I personally know people like that. There are times when scientists and innovators have some personal connection or link, especially when it is to do with healthcare or diseases. There might be some family member, or there might be some extended family member who faced a very serious problem. And this scientist or group of scientists said, well, we have to find a way to solve it. And then they will persist. And that is because they are not seeing it as a business. They are seeing it as their life's goal. What we faced as a challenge or a problem, no one else should face it. And that is a very, very big motivator. So when you have those kind of motivations and those kind of passion or goals behind your venture, that is noticed by VCs or angel investors, because then they realize, then they see, here is somebody who will not stop. They will keep trying to find a way to solve this. And that is what investors want. and that is what they value, that is what they will fund. So now let us talk about platform technologies, and I'll give you some examples. In this case, this is semiconductor quantum dots. I'm not sure how many of you can read this clearly, but this has a lot of different market applications. And this is looking at bioimaging and medicine as one market application area. Then you have communications as another area. You have machine vision as a third market application. Augmented realities, cameras, displays, illumination, energy harvesting, photovoltaic cells, bioimaging and medicine, and so on. And layers. All of this in some form connected to quantum dots. Now, the important thing to understand here is, if you are a scientist working on quantum dots, it would be highly unusual that one startup can do all of this. What will be more common, practical, and possible will be you work on quantum dots and you choose one of these to start and work on it for a couple of years. Hopefully, if you succeed, then you can move to other domains. Right? There is a researcher and scholar, I think his name is Jeffrey Moore, and he has put it analogous to a bowling alley and a bowling ball. So you see the 9 pins, and then you go to an arcade and you throw that heavy ball, and then you hit the first ball, or the first pin, and the first pin falls and hits the pins behind it. Right? So market applications have been seen in that light, saying that the entrepreneur connects the technology to all of these pins, which are market applications. And yet you have to hit one pin first, and then you have some momentum or success, which allows you to target other markets. So it is very unusual to say that one startup can do everything. Then, therefore, you get to the question, how do we choose that first? Right? You say that, well, there are 5, 7, 10 applications. I just have to choose one. But the question is, how? How will you choose? Because you want to choose something that in a couple of years, there is a strong chance of success. You are not doing this to fail. You want it to succeed. That means you have to evaluate all of these. You have to see which one is stronger, which one is weaker, which has more competition, which has less competition. There are a range of factors. Then you have to look at your own technological capabilities. Are you better at OLEDs or displays? Or are you better at biomedicine? Two very different things. Right? So you have to assess your own capabilities as well as the market conditions. Another example. This is using one product, which is white birch, a kind of tree. Now, this again is an example where the input raw material is one, and there is a process which leads to 3 different products. So you remember the figure that I showed you about demand pull, technology push? And when it was technology push, there could be multiple products going to multiple markets. So this is an actual example. This is a real life example of that phenomenon. So one tree is then processed. One aspect is making it into pulp. That pulp becomes rayon. Another part of it leads to a chemical called furfural, which leads to some specialty chemicals that are used by industry. Then you have high purity lignin, which can be used as carbon foam. And what is the use of carbon foam? It is used in the automotive industry. So look at one raw material, some industrial processes, three very different markets: automotive industry, textile industry, and specialty industrial chemicals. So the question then might be, well, do we go for rayon? Do we go for specialty chemicals? Do we go for carbon foams? Where is the best or highest profit margin? Where is the lowest competition? What is the volume that will be needed to get, say, a lot of rayon, to manufacture a large amount of rayon? How much wood will you need? How much raw material will you need? And wood is heavy. Do you need to locate your manufacturing plant near the source? Right? So all of these factors become important. So as a person developing, suppose you are a chemical engineer and you are the one making this process. When you wanted to make it into a business, you have to understand which industrial sectors will it lead to, what is the competition in those sectors, will we be cost effective, where will we source the raw material, where will we set up our manufacturing plant, how will we transport that rayon. All of these become factors. Another example, this is from the Langer lab. Now, Bob Langer, it is mentioned in some articles that he was watching a TV show on microchip fabrication. So microchips are getting fabricated, the standard processes nowadays for the computer industry. Now, how do you connect that to an unmet need? So in his mind, the connection he made was, for many drugs and medicines that doctors prescribe to patients, the patient will get cured or will feel better if the patient takes the medicine, right? The doctor gives the medicine, you go to the pharmacy, you buy the medicine. But how many times do we actually take the medicine on time? Or if it is for the family members, how many times do they take it? Or how many times do we remember to give it to them? So the unmet need is patient compliance. Even when people want to definitely feel better, they want their family members to feel better, people are busy, people forget. So if you think about the scale of that problem, irrespective of disease, irrespective of medicine, this is an underlying problem in healthcare, right? People forget to take their medicines. He connected it to microchips by saying, what if microchips could be designed that they can be implanted in the human body, and the microchips has nano wells, so small receptacles inside that chip, and every day or every few hours, as in the case of insulin and things, it automatically opens and gives the dose. So you implant the patient with the chip, and then the patient need not worry. And every day automatically this will open. The amount of drug that is needed for that patient will get released. So very elegant idea. And yet it took a long time. So there's still trials going on, I understand. So can we make a chip for drug delivery? He started working with collaborator Michael Sima, who is a faculty member at MIT. Chips with wells. The idea was sensing and delivery. And then it becomes more nuanced. Not only like you have to think about the substrate material for that microchip, you have to think about will it be biocompatible, you can inject or place it inside the human body. It has to robustly, the well has to open inside the body systematically on time. And then you have to make sure that the chip is filled with the right dosage per patient. You can take it even further. You can think about, well, you have festivals, you have people who sometimes enjoy festivals too much, and then you need more insulin. So can this chip detect when you need more insulin, when you need less insulin? So is there a detection capability that can be built in? Not just like automated dosages. Instead, it can be dynamic and releasing more when needed, releasing less when needed. So all of these kind of technologies were being explored. And the way he used to do it was John Santini, the person who is listed there as the first author on this paper, was an undergraduate student. So he gave this problem, he gave this idea to an undergrad student in engineering and said, work on this. And that student worked for during his undergrad, during his PhD, then postdoctoral work, several years. And then they started the company. When they started seeing some results, some positive results, yep, we can make that. We can design the nano wells. The nano wells can have drugs. You can implant it in the human body. Those wells can open. And then when they had, remember TRLs that we discussed yesterday? So it moved through multiple levels from an idea, from a TV show, further down into prototyping, and then they started that actual company which got funding and they moved it forward. So that's the way some of these ideas can evolve. Then another science-based idea, which seems very different. Have you seen post-it notes? So the invention of post-it notes started with a goal. So you know 3M, the company? So 3M gave a task to one of its scientists saying that we want you to make bigger, stronger, tougher adhesives. You know the Fevicol and other ads. You want strong adhesives, industrial adhesives. Now this person worked for a long time. The adhesive that he made was something, instead of strong, it was weak. That was the result of his experimentation after some time. He found that in 1968, he found some microsphere adhesives which retain their stickiness and are removable. So you attach it to something, you take it out, you attach it to something again, you take it out, and it retains its adhesion for some amount of time. And he did not know what to do with it. Very different from the goal that he was tasked to achieve. He made something that turned out to be just opposite or very different from what was required. So after a couple of years, so this was invented in 1968. And for several years inside the company, they're thinking all of this research, all of this money spent and time spent, we made something that doesn't seem to make any sense. Who will use this? Is there any logic for this? And then one day, one of his colleagues who had watched this person's seminar or research seminar in the company and remembered, he was in church and he wanted a bookmark for his hymn book. So in church, you sometimes sing and there's hymns, and there was a book, and he wanted something that would give an indicator as to I was on this page and I flipped the page, and so, but the book should not be damaged. And suddenly the light bulb struck and he said, okay, it seems like what this person was giving a presentation on, this adhesive that can be removed, that is very weak, but can be reused, that might make sense for some kind of note. Now, nobody in the world has thought of this connection. Nobody believes it. Inside the company also, people are very skeptical. Like, what are you saying? Will it make any sense? And then After a couple of years, again, lot of internal advocacy and talking to senior levels of management, yes, this can become a product, convincing them. Finally, management said, okay, let us try and launch it. So they tried an initial launch. They got a very lukewarm reception from the market. Nobody's interested. They are keeping it there. Nothing much is happening. Some reason they still persisted. After 1 year, they did a massive marketing blitz. In fact, it's called the Boise. Boise is the name of that place. It's called the Boise Blitz. They handed out free samples. They said, just take it and try to use it. Then they started getting traction because people had never seen something like this. They had never thought of how it could be used. And 1980, it was formally launched. In 2025, there are more than 4,000 plus post-it products available in over 150 countries. From this one invention, which actually missed its mark. The goal was to design something different. They made something else. They spent many years doing what? Doing technology market matching. So they had a technology. They didn't know what kind of market application could it have, what kind of adhesive, who will want a weak adhesive, if you think about it. The idea of adhesive is it should be strong. So it flipped that logic, and it's a huge multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar success in so many countries with so many product variations. In fact, there were some stats in those links, which was, it was being said that at one point of time, every industrial professional in the United States, in the course of one day's work, will get at least 11 post-it notes on some file or something. It is so pervasive now. From something that nobody had a clue. You couldn't anticipate a market. So when I talk about market surveys, lead users, there are times when you have these new to the world products where if you go and ask the people, they will not know the category. If you ask people in 1960s, do you want post-it notes? They wouldn't have understood the question. What are post-it notes? Why would we need this? Today, if you ask somebody, do you want better post-it notes? Of course, people are willing because they have seen it. So there are times when the science, innovation, or idea that you are developing is so fundamentally different and new that market research may become more challenging. But that said, if you persevere, over time, you might be able to unlock tremendous value from something as simple as this. Here is another example. Not, I wouldn't classify it necessarily as science-based, but this is an example of mechatronic exoskeleton used for, this is an actual company which is developing it for children who struggle for various reasons with walking. So this is an exoskeleton that children can wear that allows them to start walking when otherwise they couldn't. That is a startup doing this kind of work. It requires a lot of technology capabilities in very specific domains, and that technology capability was connected to this market application. There are children in many countries who struggle, and that is one market. They are looking at perhaps the European market for now, will move into North America and so on, and over time will expand as a company. Very specific market application targeted at a specific group of people, small children, having a particular kind of challenge using this. And yet, this is not the only application. Here is another application. It's not the same company, but the underlying idea or concept or technology is similar. Another exoskeleton, but this time it is used by soldiers, defense. Same technology, another very different application. The soldiers sometimes carry very heavy backpacks or things, they need extra support, and maybe this is one way to help. So same technology can have very different applications. You might get very different funding. If you're in the US, you might get funding from DARPA or those similar agencies. Probably they would have funded something like this back in the day. And this would be closer to market adoption now. The same technology, different industries, very different regulatory frameworks, very different customer requirements. One is for children who struggle to stand up. Here is people who can stand and are more physically fit than normal human beings because of the training they get, and they want further support. The requirements are different. Here is another example. What we see is in North America and many parts of the world, especially during winters, it snows heavily. The other major trend is there are more and more people flying. And flying when it is snowing is challenging. So there are lots of planes at airports in colder countries that need their bodies and wings to be de-iced because ice makes the planes heavier. It's much more risky. So the planes have to be de-iced. Because more people are flying, there are more planes, there are more airports. It is a growing market. It is a partly global market. And this is a problem which is currently being solved by something called glycol, and they put that on the plane, but that is not very eco-friendly. So there is a solution that exists. It is not perfect. There can be better things. So somebody said, instead of using chemicals, why don't we have some kind of material which acts as a heating strip? So Air Canada is testing out that material on airplanes. And if it works, you are cutting down on the amount that airports and plane manufacturers spend on de-icing. So the cost on an alternative is reduced. You have this new technology which is much more eco-friendly, and it is solving that same problem. Right? So this is another example of a growing need, a market application. There are heating pads or different kinds of heating that are, you have heated floors in the US, in Canada, in other countries. When you build your home, under the tiles, you can put heating. So logic, you could say, is similar, right? So you have some kind of coating through which electricity passes, through which heat is generated, and that is giving you the benefit you want. Instead of doing something below your tiles on the floor of your home or your office, you're doing it on a plane and making it much more eco-friendly in return. Here is an industrial example. Enzymes for thinner and softer wool. So wool manufacturing, wool refining is all very traditionally done. Not many changes in this industry. And there are industrial enzymes now in place. And this is an example from Scotland, from the wool industry there, saying that they are trying to develop enzymes. They are using enzymes which will make the wool even thinner, and therefore the fibers can be more lighter, softer, which means that the fabrics that get made from that will be even higher quality, which will then mean that those fabrics will be more expensive, which means that there will be higher profit margin. Industrial application for something that some scientist would have developed in the lab, some enzymes that they would have developed in the lab. So this is how the connection can be made between what is a technology and what is a market application. Here is an older example where technologies are being combined. So back in the day, you had X-ray technology for medical imaging and CAT scanning or different kind of scans. Then you had it combined with computer technology at the time, that's the label that was used, and data processing. So there are times when different technologies can be combined together to create one solution. And all of these are instances where you as a scientist, you as a technology developer would want to explore what is the need being solved. In fact, one example that I didn't put here together is now they are trying to develop a new kind of scanner where two people can go in simultaneously. The idea being that they want to assess how brains behave when there is a person next to you, right? So they want to understand the dynamic changes inside the brain when other human beings are nearby, and how that informs your understanding of the brain, how that informs, like there are neurodivergent children or adults. You want to assess their level of social functioning and things like that. So you want to unlock and try to assess. So there are new kinds of scanners. I didn't put that example here, but these are all ways in which you can add or improve upon existing technologies to solve some of the newer challenges or some of the more complex challenges we face. Now, one aspect of our assessment of unmet needs is, who do we ask? Who are the experts? Especially in the healthcare domain, there can be very many people or very many users who get involved. Now, this is an example of a group of people. This is also connected to COVID. This is from an example from Canada. During COVID, along with people making masks and hand sanitizers and vaccines and therapeutics, if you remember, there was a lot of people struggling with breathing. So there were a lot of work being done to, well, we need to make ventilators. Where ventilators were in short supply. So this is a direct link to that sort of challenge a couple of years back. And people started exploring, well, let us make 3D printed ventilators or components for ventilators. How do we make that happen? And in doing so, what they did was, well, we are engineers, we are developing it. And at one point they thought, well, let us ask the doctors also. They talk to frontline clinicians or doctors who are involved in treating these patients who struggle to breathe. And here is some of the feedback that they gave. An anesthesiologist said, well, it is not just people who are struggling with COVID. This can also be used for people who are spinal cord injury patients or more severely brain injured patients. However, they said that unless they are in a very highly monitored ICU, you will need to design something that can sense the rate of breathing. So it's just not you are pushing the air. You have to understand the pace of how much is being taken by the patient. And there should be some dynamic element to it. It should be personalized. It's just not one machine. Anyone with any needs, you are just pushing the same amount of air. Older, younger person, more severely, less severely, you need to be able to modulate that. Then a registered respiratory therapist said, you will not sell one ventilator if you can't give oxygen. So he or she, they were saying that you need to understand oxygen manufacturers, what is the size of those cylinders, what is the way you connect those cylinders to these kind of devices. So your ventilator should have some standards around what's the way you connect it. Same way for electric vehicles, you have those charging ports, right? So you just cannot put any kind of charger. So those are all dependent on standards. You have to understand. Then An educator said, well, some of the features we discussed today are standard. We don't even talk about it because we expect every ventilator to have it. As an engineer in the lab, you may not necessarily know what the doctors consider as standard equipment, as a standard feature. They will say, we want this facility that's been there in ventilators for 25 years. And you are making something which doesn't have that basic feature. We don't even talk about it because we expect it to be there. If you don't have it, it will never get bought. So unless you talk to those people, you may not understand which feature is standard, which feature is more valuable, which feature is good to have but not necessary. So you need to understand the importance of different features in the product that you are making. None of these, one of the things that I didn't include is, after this study, this is a research paper, the engineers themselves gave a comment and they said, hadn't we talked to the doctors, we wouldn't have known about any of this. We still would have made some ventilator. It would still have gone through prototyping. We might have formed a startup, and then they would have been surprised by our people not buying it. Right? So that's why it is important to talk to the people who are the users of these devices. The patient won't be able to tell you all this. The patient who is getting that oxygen doesn't know any of this. So it is like all of us have a different view of the way these products are developed and used. So some stakeholders in the medical context, of course, can be patients, they can be surgeons, they can be assistants to the surgeons, nurses, engineering staff, sales staff, service technicians, insurance providers and payers. If you design something and the insurance company says, we are not going to pay for this, it will not work. More common in North America and increasingly common in India. You have to, as a startup, also see, well, are we making something that will fit into all of these processes? Hospital administrators and finance teams, it has to make economic sense for them. You solve the technical problem, did you solve the financial feasibility problem? Is it cost competitive? And in, say, Canada's case and other cases, sometimes in public funded healthcare systems, it is not the hospitals that are sometimes buying, it is health authorities for the province or the state that is purchasing hundreds of ventilators for the whole state or province and sending it to different hospitals. So then they will have different criteria. So all of these should be a factor in a startup which is making a ventilator using 3D printing. In the lab, chances are high that you may not be thinking about this. You are focused, you are spending all of your time solving the technical problem. But to get to that patient who is struggling to breathe, the way to get that ventilator that you are making to that patient, you have to go through this. Okay, now on the topic of talking to people and who can we ask? Here is one final example which talks about aging. Aging is a fact of life. All of us will get old. All of us who have family members who are getting old. And older people, as you change, your perception of technology changes. So if you look at the phone, what you can see as a younger person is very different from what you can see on the screen as an older person. You will struggle to at times press the button because you cannot see the button, or your fingers are not agile enough. That is why so many people struggle and say, well, we have got family members in other countries, we want them to call us, but they don't know how to use the phone, they don't know how to use Zoom or an iPad. big problems that people have, common problem. Now, this is an example of Barbara Beskind and a company called IDEO. Has anyone heard of this company called IDEO? IDEO is a design firm. So they do industrial design. So they will design things like what is the shape of different devices or chairs. So they are doing industrial design. Now, they hired this person, Barbara Beskin, uh, when she was 91 years old. The idea behind hiring her was, well, if you want to design products for older people, who should you ask? Older people. And yet, if you think about product development teams in many places, products are designed, but the person developing it is not connected or doesn't understand or doesn't know what is the lived experience. And so she was brought on, and many times she was 3 times the age of the other people in the room, the other developers, engineers, scientists. And so the kind of question, so she was involved in one project to design robots. And the idea was, nurses, it takes a lot of time for someone to become trained as a nurse. And nurses have a very heavy workload. People are becoming older. If they live in care homes, if they are living in care homes, sometimes the nurse might come to a patient in one day for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, that's it. So patients are left alone, old people are left alone. And so you need some system by which you can monitor older people, because nurses are overworked. You cannot train enough nurses. To pay nurses is very expensive. And so you need some robot solution. And now what Barbara Beskin said was, of course, there is the technical problem of robots, imaging, privacy concerns, and all of that. So people are solving the technical problem. What she said was, would it help if it had a friendlier female voice? Would it help like the big eyes? She noted the size of the eyes. She said, these eyes look like that of a toy. I am an older person. That doesn't mean I am a child. I don't want that big eye to give the impression that now I'm not an adult. I'm childlike. So I would prefer if it were smaller. Nobody would have thought of something like that. That how is it that the size of the eye? Maybe the person designing it thought, well, the size of the eye is bigger. I can fit in a bigger camera. Therefore, I can see more things. It will make it easier. It will be more safe. But the person using it has a very different perception of the same product feature. Then she said, can your doctor send medications to the robot? Can we, suppose I'm not in a care home and I'm living alone all by myself, is there a way that the robot can connect to my doctor automatically if needed? Could it be paid for by Medicare? Could some agency pay for this? These are things that the technology developer wouldn't have thought. So when you work on your technologies and your ideas, really think about who is the user. What is their perception? How will they use your product? It is, you will have to step out of your technology bubble and explore how people pick up your device. How do they close that car door? How do they look at the eyes of the robot? And then you understand. I was also talking to somebody who is a green hydrogen technology developer, and he said one very interesting thing. When you are selling to from a business to another business, you are selling to two people. Not only are you selling to your current customer, you are selling also to your customer's customer. Because if you are designing, say, automotive glass, so glass you use on windshields, so you might sell that to somebody who is making a car, but ultimately that car is bought by people. So not only should your windshield meet the technical specifications of the car manufacturer, you should also be thinking about the user or the driver of the car. What might they want? What might there be some features? that people want. So you have to think about multiple layers of customers at times, and that can also help you take some of these ideas forward. Claris Healthcare, this is again touching upon aging. So a lot of people have parents in other countries who are getting older and they want to connect with those parents or older people. And those older people struggle to use all of these communication devices. So this is a company from Canada that is developing different kinds of iPads and apps, and they have spent many years. It seems like a very small technical problem. You can make apps, but they have spent many years doing research with older people, how to design it so that it is seamless and as easy to use as possible. And Canada, given that it's a country where a lot of people emigrate to, so you have people who might be Filipinos, who might be Japanese, Korean, from different parts of India, from other places. So you have to look at the range of people, the cultural background, all of that can impact the design of the technology and how you can make it all simple. So all of this to technologies can be, you start from the lab, but there is a whole world outside to fit to or connect to. Or so all of these examples will there is this last example about aging on walkers. Said use one of these. It makes me I'm stooped over. This old person who is struggling to look healthy and strong. So there was a need to design a new kind of mobility device. So enter this device. It's called the Alinker. Barbara Alink, that is the person. And she designed that comment was her mother. Industrial designer who designed it for her own mother. And in this, there is a sort of a seat. And so at eye level. Now, what you will learn is that many people who are using walkers or one of those wheelchairs, there is a big difference in eye level. When you are sitting, your eye level is that of a child. And all the people around you, your children or others, they are looking down on you. Somebody who's been an adult and who's used to standing and walking and doing things very independently, they don't like that. So what this person did was, she designed something that had a seat, the weight is supported by the seat, no stress on the lower body, handlebars provide additional support, feet remain on the ground. So you move the feet, but you are seated, and there are wheels, and two in the front, so that lesser chance of falling. Now let us look at the feedback. What are people saying about this? It's just a walker, right? So people won't be too excited. So this is what people are saying. With the Alinker, I can whiz down the hallway, like I'm running like a child. I can whiz down the hallway, easily make eye contact, and seem to have a permanent smile. It's an emotional attachment. I'll be fitting in society again like I should. So I'm not disabled, or I'm not dependent on other people. Now I'm looked at as a curious person, not as somebody who is disabled or has a challenge. I'm looked at as a person who has this really cool new kind of device. For the first time in many years, I'm walking side by side with friends and companions instead of sitting and somebody pushing. And older people say 90-year-olds are traveling to different countries because they can take this along with them. So all of these examples show that if you ever face a problem, or you know users who face a problem, you really try to understand that problem, because if you flip it, you might have a solution behind it. That is what you want to work on. So if you have a solution but you don't have a problem, that is the kind of laser situation that we had earlier on. You want to try and identify what are the big problems in life for that customer group. What are the big problems? And can you develop a solution? Part of the way these sessions are structured is I also wanted all of you, many of you have your own technology ideas. So I wanted that some of the work that we do in the class is also adding value to each of your ideas, right? So now when we come back, I will talk a little and you will do more work, and I can come around and ask you about the ideas that you are doing, and then we can explore and try to advance the work that you are already doing. Okay. And in case there is anybody who doesn't have a technology that they are currently working on, you can pair with someone in the class and you can work together and take something forward.